0214 local time. Yesterday, Bandar Abbas Regional Grid Control Center, southern Iran. Sergeant Farzad Nasseri had been watching the same green lines climb and fall for 6 hours. He was 26 years old, and his coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago because he refused to leave his console to make another cup. On the wall in front of him, a schematic of the entire Southern Power Network glowed like a nervous system, every substation a node. Every high-voltage line, a vein carrying current to the naval base, the missile depots, the radar sites strung along the coast. His job was to keep that nervous system breathing. Tonight, it was breathing steadily. Every light on his board was green. He liked the night shift. It was quiet. His wife was 3 months pregnant, and he had spent most of the evening pretending to monitor load balances while actually thinking about names. Down the corridor, in a room with better chairs and worse coffee, Colonel Mahmoud Shirazi did not share his sergeant's peace. Shirazi commanded the air defense envelope protecting the entire Bandar Abbas complex. And for 11 days, he had felt something he could not name, the specific dread of a man who has built a wall and cannot stop wondering whether the enemy has simply decided to walk around it. He had 900 megawatts of generating capacity under his protection. He had the single most important converter station in the South. He had, on paper, everything. He checked the sky picture. Clean. He checked it again anyway. Here is what the colonel understood, and what made him afraid. A power grid is not a target you can lose slowly. It is not like an airfield, where you crater a runway and repair it in a week. A modern grid is a chain of synchronized machines all humming at exactly the same frequency. And if you break the chain in 3 places at once, the right 3 places, the whole thing does not degrade. It collapses. And the crown jewel, the thing Iran genuinely could not afford to lose, sat 40 kilometers from where Sergeant Nasseri was thinking about baby names. A high-voltage converter station that fed power to the coastal naval infrastructure. Russia had helped design its defenses. China had supplied the surveillance radar that watched the skies above it. Iran had built the wall around what it had been given. The colonel's problem was that walls only work if the enemy comes through the front. 600 kilometers to the south, over the warm black water of the Arabian Sea, Major Danielle Cross rolled her F-35A into a gentle bank and watched the fuel numbers tick down. Call sign Vega. 34 years old, Air Force Academy class of 2015. And on her 9th combat sortie of a campaign the news back home was still arguing about. Her wingman, Captain Marcus Webb, held position 2 miles off her right wing, invisible on radar, invisible to the eye, running dark, and higher still, orbiting like a patient storm. Lieutenant Commander Aisha Okafor rode the back seat of an E-18 Green Growler. Her fingers already resting on the switches that would, in about 40 minutes, make the entire Iranian air defense network temporarily forget how to see. None of them said much. There was nothing to say yet. In 4 hours, the lights across an entire Iranian province would go out. And it would take Colonel Shirazi's engineers 11 days to understand that the wall he had trusted, had never been the thing keeping him safe, and that the front door he had guarded so carefully had never mattered at all. At 05:51, Okafor flipped the first switch. She did not fire a weapon, she poured noise. The Growler's jamming pods flooded the sky with a wall of electronic garbage. And across 3 Iranian radar sites, the clean green picture that had comforted Colonel Shirazi all night dissolved into snow. It was not dramatic. That was the entire point. To the operators on the ground. It looked like weather. It looked like a bad night for the equipment. It looked like nothing. Screens are dirty, a technician reported to Shirazi's watch floor. Probably atmospheric. Recalibrate faster, someone answered. Under that curtain of noise, 2 F-35s that officially were not there slid to their release points. Cross had 3 targets, and she had 90 seconds to erase all of them. Target 1, the converter station, the crown jewel, the thing Iran could not afford to lose. Target 2, a hardened switchyard that fed the coastal naval base. Target 3, The grid control center, where a 26-year-old sergeant was still, at that exact moment, staring at a board that had just started to blink. Cross's voice was flat. Vega has 3. Confirm weapons free. Weapons free, came the answer. Copy. Showtime. The first pair of standoff munitions dropped clean off her rails and lit their motors. And in the control center, Sergeant Nasiri watched a single node on his schematic flicker from green to amber. He frowned. He tapped the screen the way you tap a watch that is stopped. Amber meant a fault. Amber was normal. Amber happened. Then the node beside it went amber. Then the one beside that. Sir, Nasiri said, and he heard his own voice come out wrong. Sir, I have a cascade. 3 faults. Southern ring, there, sir, there, not clearing. 90 seconds. That was the number. The weapons needed 90 seconds to reach all 3 aim points. And in those 90 seconds, Iran had exactly one chance to do something, anything about a threat it could not see, could not track, and did not yet believe was real. It was not enough. It was never going to be enough. The colonel would spend the rest of his career learning that the 90 seconds had been lost. 11 days earlier, the moment he decided the sky was clean because his radar told him so, the first weapon arrived. The converter station, the crown jewel, the irreplaceable one. The reason any of this had a point did not explode the way movies teach you to expect. There was a flash, and then there was simply an absence, a hole in the map where 900 megawatts of capacity had been a heartbeat before. On Nasiri's board, a third of the province went black in the time it takes to blink. It's gone. A technician screamed on the watch floor. The converter is gone. We have no southern feed. Colonel Shirazi stood up so fast, his chair fell over. To his credit, Shirazi did everything right. He did everything the manuals said, and it did not matter. And the fact that it did not matter is the most frightening part of the whole story. He scrambled his interceptors first. Captain Reza Tehrani, 41, a veteran F-14 pilot who had kept a Cold War airframe flying through decades of sanctions on nothing but stubbornness and improvised parts, was airborne in under 4 minutes, a genuinely extraordinary feat. He climbed hard into a sky he had been told contained nothing. Hunting an enemy his radar swore was not present. Control, Tehrani. Vector me. I have nothing on scope. Give me a bearing. Anything. Stand by. I don't have time to stand by. The grid is falling. Where are they? There was no answer, because there was no bearing to give. You cannot vector a man toward an aircraft. You cannot detect. Shirazi tried the surface-to-air missiles. Next, his crews brought the launchers to full readiness and swept the sky with everything they had. And the Growlers jamming reached down and gently unplugged their certainty. The missiles that Russia had promised would find any target found the brightest thing in a sky full of electronic noise, which was noise itself. 2 launched at ghosts. 1 launched at a jamming signal and chased it uselessly into empty air. But war has a way of collecting a price even from the winning side, and it collected one now. As Captain Webb rolled off his second target, a short-range battery that no one had jammed a small, stubborn, locally controlled system that the plan had rated as harmless, fired on instinct at a shadow it barely saw. The fragmentation caught the underside of Webb's F-35 and shredded his hydraulics. Vega 2, I'm hit, controls are going. 2, get her over the water, point her at the water, and get out. I've got your position. Webb held the crippled jet on brute strength and rudder for 90 more seconds. Long enough to cross the coastline, and then he pulled the handle. The canopy blew, the seat fired, and Marcus Webb was thrown into the pre-dawn dark under a good canopy, his aircraft tumbling away beneath him into the Gulf. A rescue helicopter was already turning toward his beacon before he hit the water. He was alive. He would stay alive. But an $80 million aircraft was gone, and Cross now had 2 targets down. 1 to go, and a wingman in the sea. She did not hesitate. There was nothing to hesitate about. Vega is solo, completing the package. The third target, the control center, where Sergeant Nasiri sat, was never going to be destroyed with him inside it. That was not the mission, and it was not how these things were run. 90 seconds before impact and evacuation order that the crew had rehearsed 100 times finally meant something. And Nasseri was hauled up out of his chair by a lieutenant, screaming at him to move, to leave the board, to leave the cold coffee, to run. He ran. They all ran. And the weapon that arrived did not care about names for unborn children. It cared about transformers and switching gear and the fat copper arteries that carried current to a naval base that would now sit dark and useless on the coast. The strike package that finished the job came from higher and farther, a stealth bomber that had been holding silent above it all. Now walking a line of precision weapons across the last hardened node while a pair of anti-radiation missiles hunted down the one battery that had dared to hit Webb. The battery that had drawn American blood lasted 11 seconds after it revealed itself, on the ground, from a safe distance. Sergeant Nasseri turned and watched the building he had guarded all night become a column of orange against a sky going gray with dawn. He was breathing hard, he was unhurt, and he understood, in a way he could not have put into words, that he had been protecting the wrong thing all along, that the wall had faced the wrong direction, that the enemy had never intended to knock. 90 seconds, 3 targets, an entire province in the dark. By 09:00, the official statements had begun, and they told a familiar story. State media reported that a small technical fault had caused a localized outage, that the situation was under control, that repairs were already underway, that the enemy's claims were exaggerated propaganda. The energy minister, in the same breath, urged citizens to reduce their electricity consumption. Satellite imagery told the truth. Where a converter station had stood, there was scorched foundation. Where a switchyard had fed the coast, there was tangled steel. An entire coastal military infrastructure radar, docks, missile handling, sat cold and blind, drawing on emergency generators that could power emergency lighting and nothing that mattered. The repair estimate leaked out slowly over the following weeks. And it was not measured in days. It was measured in seasons. Colonel Shirazi kept his command, which is its own kind of sentence. He spent 11 days writing a report explaining how a network he had guarded with Russian doctrine and Chinese radar, and 11 years of his own life had been switched off in 90 seconds. By an enemy, his sensors never registered. He did not have a good answer. There was no good answer to give. He had prepared for the weapons he could see. That was the whole of his mistake. Captain Reza Tirani landed his old F-14 40 minutes after he took off. Having found nothing, fired at nothing, chased nothing but static across an empty sky. He shut the engines down and sat in the cockpit for a long time in the dark, a veteran pilot who had kept a legend flying for decades, understanding for the first time that stubbornness and skill are not the same thing as sight that you cannot fight what you were never allowed to detect. Captain Marcus Webb was pulled from the Gulf 91 minutes after ejecting, cold and bruised and entirely alive, and was flying a desk within the week, while investigators asked him the same 3 questions 40 different ways. He would fly again, his aircraft would not. And Major Danielle Cross flew home in the growing light, with 2 weapons still on her rails and 1 empty spot off her wing, and said nothing at all. Here is the thing the whole night was trying to teach, if anyone on the other side had been willing to learn it. You cannot defend a wall against an enemy who has no intention of touching it. You cannot vector a fighter toward an aircraft your radar refuses to admit exists. You cannot win a war by preparing perfectly for the last one. The most dangerous weapon in modern warfare is not the loudest. It is not the fastest. It is not the missile or the bomber or the jamming pod humming quietly 600 kilometers away. The most dangerous weapon in modern warfare is an enemy who has already decided which door you are not watching and has been patient enough to wait until you were sure the sky was clean. They guarded the front. The lights went out from behind. Bye for now.